I'm going to give you a little bit of background information on this story. It takes place in a rural part of Iowa. When this first occurred, I was a 12-year-old girl. I had just moved to Iowa with my family from Tennessee. When I say that we moved there from Tennessee, I wasn't talking about any of the country parts. I was actually talking about Memphis. The reason that we had moved to Iowa anyways is because where we were staying before wasn't the nicest part of town, and to be honest, it really wasn't safe for me to be outside, and also because my brother, who was much older, had gotten into serious trouble there, and they were wanting me to be on a better path. The house that we moved into was an old, run-down, 2-story white house. It was much better than the place that we previously lived in, but it kind of freaked me out as to just how old it was. Despite all the flaws that it had, and all the work that needed to be done to it, my family loved it since day one. The first week of staying there actually turned out pretty good. I had met some people at school, had made some friends, and it turns out that Joel, one of my good friends, actually lived right down the street from me, which I thought was a very good thing because I didn't really have any friends before. Before too long, me and Joel were hanging out every day. We were inseparable, and we were always pulling pranks on each other, just trying to get a few laughs. You know how kids are. About the time that winter rolled around, and we got the first snow, that's when the troubles began. And if you've never been to Iowa when it snows, or if you're from the South, or anywhere where there isn't really much snow, then you're in for a rude awakening up in Iowa. It was so cold. The only thing that we had to keep us warm was the fireplace and a few electric heaters that my mom had went and bought at Walmart. But anyways, now back to the story. I was sleeping one night, and I couldn't have been sleeping for more than an hour or two. I was abruptly woken by what sounded like a tapping sound, but I couldn't quite pinpoint on where it was coming from because it had stopped as soon as I woke up. I laid there for 15 minutes until I convinced myself that it was all just my imagination, my mind playing tricks on me. About 30 minutes later, I jolted awake as I heard a loud thud on my window. I was petrified to what was happening. I lay completely still in my bed, trying not to move or make a noise, as I felt chills start from my head and move all the way down to my toes. I laid there for what seemed like an eternity, until eventually I ended up falling asleep. I'm not really sure as to why I fell asleep and I just didn't go running to my parents' room, but it was probably due to the fact that if I woke them up and there wasn't nothing out there, they would think I was lying and no one would believe me. Upon waking up from the sun shining in my window directly onto my face, I quickly slipped on my house shoes and I walked over to the window. I looked out of the window, and to my relief, I didn't see any footprints, but this is probably due to the fact that it had been snowing all night and it could have been covered up. But just due to the fact that I didn't see anything, I convinced myself once again that everything was in my imagination and nothing bad was going on. Fast forward a month down the road, and everything's been back to normal, no more bad experiences sleeping, and everything seems to be going great. Well, everything was going great, up until the night that my parents decided to go out on date night so they could try to rekindle their relationship, which had been failing. Now, I usually wouldn't be there by myself, but my brother was hanging out with some friends that he'd recently made since we'd moved there, and to be honest, it was a relief, because usually 90% of the time when he's at home, we're either fighting or arguing about something. We just can't get along about anything. But anyways, I was sitting there in my room on my bed, watching a few Facebook videos on my phone, and I heard a clicking noise on my window. I glanced at the window, and I couldn't see anything. After waiting a minute, I mustered up the courage to turn my lights off, that way I could see outside into the dark, and to my horror, there was a long-haired, man tapping on my window with some inch-long fingernails. His hair was greasy, his clothes looked old and torn, and just by looking at him and the way that he gave me a creepy smile, I knew that something was seriously wrong with this man. I quickly started browsing through my contacts trying to find my mom's number, and the man started tapping on the window again, and as I glanced up, he shushed me, and he said,
"You know, if you tell anyone about me, I'm gonna have to kill you."
My eyes began to water. I was tearing up. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. Was this my last night alive? Was I gonna die to this deranged man standing outside my window? Tears streamed down my cheeks and I buried my face into my hands. I was trying to figure out what to do. Should I go against the man's wishes and call my parents? But if I was to do that, and he seen me on my phone doing it, then he would surely have enough time to kill me before anybody could get here to save me. Even if I did try to call the cops, the police station was 15 minutes away and I'd be long dead before anyone got here. When I finally took my face out of my hands and glanced back at the window, the man was gone. There was no trace of him. I bolted to the bathroom. I closed the door and barricaded myself in there. I quickly called my mom and dad and asked them where they were at. They replied that they were at a local Italian restaurant and everything was going well. I told them that I really wasn't feeling too well and I asked if they could hurry up and get home, please. Now usually, doing something like this would cause a fight or an argument between us, but I think because of the tone of my voice, they could tell that something was seriously wrong, so they replied that they would get a to-go box and they'll be home in 15 minutes. While I was waiting for them, I called Joe on my cell phone and I told him all about what was happening. I hadn't told him about my previous experience, so he was shocked when he heard me tell him this. He told me that the previous family that lived there, they ended up moving after their daughter went missing. I was terrified. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. And then he burst out laughing. He said that it was all a joke. He said that everything was all in my head and that the tapping noise was probably a branch hitting my house due to the wind. After what seemed like an eternity, I heard the jingling of the doorknob downstairs. I froze and panicked for a moment, but then I realized the sound was the key going into the lock and the doorknob turning. I ran downstairs without haste to see my parents. Still out of breath from running downstairs, I tried to tell my dad what had happened. He told me to take a minute, get my breath, and then slowly explain to me what had happened. I told him about the noise that I had heard a month ago, and then I proceeded to tell him about the crazy, deranged man that was at my window. After telling him everything that happened, he looked at me in disbelief and told me I'd been watching too many scary movies. But regardless, he searched the house from top to bottom, all the way from the attic down to the basement. He went around with flashlights outside, shined the light everywhere, and he said that he didn't see any proof that anyone at all was ever at our house. I laid there that night. I struggled to sleep, and I didn't know what to do. It seemed like no matter what I did or said, no one believed me, so I was in this all alone. The very next day, I begged and pleaded with my dad to do something. He was furious, but after enough persistence, I was able to get him to send my mother to the store to get some security cameras. With him sending my mom to the store, it was a good stroke of luck that this happened. Apparently, this crazy man had been stalking me and my family for a while. He knew that whenever my mom left, that my dad was always with her. But just by chance, he wasn't with her this time, but he thought I was there alone. He had to be staying somewhere close to my house, because no later than 5 minutes after my mom left, I heard a tapping noise on my window. I looked up in horror, and I told him to just leave me alone. This was not the right thing to say to that man, because his creepy grin turned into an angry grimace. I'll never forget what he said to me next.
"You know what happens to bad little girls whenever they talk back?"
He yelled,
"Ah!"
I screamed as glass went flying all over my room. I hopped off of my bed and I sprinted to the door as fast as possible. Just as I got to the doorway, I felt a hand grab my ankle and I tripped and fell. I screamed as I felt a burning sensation go down my ankle. This man had cut my ankle with a knife, and he was dragging me towards the window. I feared for my life as I looked back and see my blood dripping off of a shiny long blade. I was telling myself in my mind, this is where it ends. This is how you're going to die. Then my father burst into the room with his Glock 40 pointed at the man. He said, drop the weapon and stay right there. The man turned and he tried to jump out the window. My father shot him in the back of the leg. He collapsed on the floor and he yelled in pain. It might sound kind of bad to say this, but I was taking deep pleasure out of watching this guy suffer. After all the suffering that he brought to me, it felt good to see him lying there in agonizing pain as the blood left his body. My dad told me to go to the other room as he called the police, and he sat there and made sure that the man didn't leave. I told Joel everything that happened about the crazy man, my dad shooting him. I even showed Joel the cut on my ankle. I don't think that he believed me at first, but then our town even posted an article in the local newspaper. It turns out that this guy was suspected of being the cause of several other missing kids that were never found. Me and my dad don't always see eye to eye, but I sure am glad that he was there that night, or I don't think I would be here today to tell you this story. It's been 7 years now, and I haven't seen or heard anything about that man again, and to be honest, I hope that I never do. Have you guys ever went on a date on one of those dating websites? Well, my name is Jonathan, and I'm going to tell you exactly why you should never, ever go onto a date with somebody off of a dating website unless you are 100% sure that you know who they are. This happened a few years back when I was 22 and I was staying with my roommate Sean. I was kind of new to the having your own place thing because I'd been staying at my parents' and helping them out. But after a while of staying with Sean and seeing all the fun things that he was able to get into and how much fun that he seemed to be having being able to do things that I just wasn't able to do before, I thought to myself, wow, I've been missing out on a lot. I really got to find something to do. So I was sitting there at the table with Sean one night. We'd been drinking Bud White with lime all day, and he'd already taken all my money as we were playing poker. I thought to myself, you know what? It's time that I get a girlfriend, because I was never really big on the dating scene because my parents are the super strict type. You know, the type that want to know everything you do and every little thing about you, and I just wasn't prepared to bring a girl around them. So I was sitting there drunk off my ass, barely coherent, talking to Sean, and I was like, Sean, you need to do me a favor. You need to hook me up with some of those girls you're getting. He said, sure thing, bro. We're roommates after all. No problem. I know just the one for you. Well, every girl that he got me, they were either overweight or they were really ugly. And I'm not trying to say that I'm attractive in any way, but it seemed to me like he was doing this intentionally, because he was always seen with a pretty girl, and it seemed like the only ones that he was giving to me was the ones that he just straight up didn't want. So after 2 weeks of no luck, I thought to myself, I'm just going to have to take this into my own hands. I browsed around on Google for a little bit, and I was trying to research and figure out the best way to pick up girls, but I'm not really the most social type of person, so after a little bit of thinking and more reading, I decided maybe this wasn't for me. At the last moment, whenever I was about to just say, forget it altogether, I decided to try online dating when I seen an ad pop up. I was like, well, I've done read everything. The least I can do is try, and the worst that'll happen will be it won't work out. At least that's what I was thinking. There are far, far worse things than having a relationship not work out. So after a while of sitting there on my phone, I was on this app trying to find girls to talk to, but no one would message me back. And just as I was about to get off and delete the app, this girl named Jessica messaged me, and to be honest, she was very attractive, so I was kinda surprised. We sat there and messaged back and forth for about 4 hours until I finally told her I had to hit the bed because I had to go to work the next day, and she said alright. But she said, before you go, can I have your number? I thought to myself for a second, I don't really know this girl, so I don't really want to be giving out my phone number just yet. So I made up an excuse and told her that I didn't have any minutes and the only way I was able to talk to her on the app was through the Wi-Fi at my apartment. She said that she understood and we could just talk through there whenever I get back home from work. As I was sitting there working all day at this crappy fast food place, the only thing that was on my mind was to get back home and talk to her. Finally, after hours and hours of agonizing burger flipping, I was able to clock out and go home. As soon as I got home, I sat down on the couch and grabbed me a beer and I messaged her. She promptly responded and asked, "How was your day at work? Were the customers too rough on you?" And I responded, "They weren't too bad. It was just a boring day, and to be honest, I was really just looking forward to talking to you." She replied, "The same for me. I was looking forward to talking to you all day. I bet working in the food industry sucks." I responded, "It has its ups and downs, but it's money at least." Then I thought to myself for a second, how does she know that I work in the fast food industry? How does she know I make food? This was something that didn't really come up in conversation because, to be honest, I really didn't want a girl to know that I was working at fast food being 22 years old. I got a little bit worried, so I asked her, "How exactly do you know that I work in the fast food industry?" She said, "Because I seen your shirt and your profile picture, you silly goof." I sighed with relief, and I couldn't believe my own stupidity that I forgot to take off my work shirt before taking a profile picture. After 2 more days of talking, I decided it was time for us to see each other, and I invited her over to my apartment. She said that she was super excited to see me and she was going to go shopping to pick out something to wear. But on the day that we were supposed to hang out, she canceled after I told her that my roommate was going to be there. I honestly didn't understand why she canceled so abruptly, but she said that her sister was sick and her parents were out of town, so she had to go take care of her little sister. That right there should have immediately been a red flag. But me being my stupid self, I didn't really think much about it and I just brushed it off. She sent me a message later that night and asked for my phone number, and I finally gave it to her, and so we decided to text. She gave me a long apology about having to bail so quickly because of her sister, and I said, "No, it's alright, I understand. You gotta make sure that your family's alright first of all." She said that her sister was doing much better and she ended up taking her to the doctor. Then Jessica asked me would I like to go out hiking to make up for not being able to go out. I sighed to myself and I said, "Yes, of course that sounds fun." But I was thinking to my mind, hiking? I would rather just watch a movie or hang out at the apartment, but you gotta start somewhere. Thankfully, when we were supposed to go hiking the next day, it came up a big thunderstorm and it was just raining terribly. I used that as an excuse to not go hiking, but then she asked would I like to go get coffee instead. I told her sure, and I told her I was looking forward to meeting her at the Starbucks. After all, it's only 5 minutes away from my house, so I didn't even have to waste much gas. I got there pretty early, and I sat there and I waited and waited and waited for what seemed like an hour. Whenever I was about to give up and just get up and leave because I thought I'd been pranked by my roommate or something, she sent me a message and said, "I'm here. I'm coming in now." When Jessica walked in, Jessica was not the person that was on her profile pictures. Jessica looked very similar, but this Jessica was clearly a man wearing female's clothes. Immediately, I had a terrible knot in my stomach, but I decided to sit there and go through the date because, after all, I'd already waited an hour and this person was already here, so it won't hurt to have coffee with them at least. We sit there and 1 cup of coffee turned into 2, and then 3, and then the person that we are calling Jessica said,
You can just call me Jesse. I didn't want to scare you, but I'm glad that we're here now and we're talking and everything's going amazing.
I thought to myself, it's not going amazing. This is a disaster. But I agreed that everything was going amazing just to not hurt Jesse's feelings. After 3 agonizing hours at that coffee shop, I told Jesse that I had to get going because I had a busy day tomorrow. But Jesse just kept talking and telling stories and rambling on and pretended to not even notice what I had just said. So I said it again, and Jesse looked at me and was like,
Are you not having fun? I thought everything was going well. What do you mean you gotta go?
I explained that there wasn't no problem at all, but I seriously had a lot to do the next day, so I was like, look, I'm going to go home. I will message you later. Jesse sighed and finally agreed to it, and I thought to myself, whew, I'm glad that I'm out of this situation. I thought to myself, when I get out of here and leave, I'm never going to talk to this person again, and I'm going to delete that app. I got home later that night, and I had told Joel what happened. He thought it was the funniest thing that he'd ever heard in his entire life, and he said, that's what happens when you try to do stuff on your own and you don't go through me. I quickly responded, maybe you're right, and I kinda laughed it off because now that I think about it, it was pretty funny. But what happened next was not funny at all, by any means. I started seeing a blue Dodge Caravan drive up and by our apartment over and over the following days. It seemed that every time I went outside, they just happened to be driving by. So I started thinking to myself, what the hell? Did Jesse follow me home? And now that I think about it, I don't even know what Jesse drives. I put 2 and 2 together, and I figured out it was Jesse. I sent him a text and told him not to ever contact me again or to come by my place or I'll call the cops on him, and then I promptly blocked his number. After that, I started receiving serious threats from random numbers, it seemed. I tried to call the numbers back, but whenever I did, it said it wasn't a working number. At this point, I was seriously scared. This Jesse person was an absolute maniac, and they would not leave me alone. I called the police and told them what was going on and went to the police department, gave them a statement, and showed the numbers that had been texting me. They said, unfortunately, since they couldn't trace it back to him, at the moment there was nothing they could do, but they said to call him if anything comes up and I need him. Later that night, I was awoken by the sound of glass shattering downstairs. I promptly ran downstairs as fast as I could to see who the intruder was. And I can't say this is surprising, but when I got down there was Jesse standing in our living room, holding a hammer. He said,
You shouldn't have blocked me.
Just as he had said that, my roommate come flying down the stairs with a pocket knife in hand. Sean said, I don't know what's going on here, but you better get the hell out of my apartment. Jesse responded, I will leave after I get an apology. What you did to me was wrong. As much as I didn't want to, I swallowed my pride and I gave an apology. And I told Jesse, look, if you're going to be meeting people, you can't act crazy and you can't lie about your gender. Now you better get the hell out of our apartment and we don't ever want to hear or see you again. That was the last that we ever heard from Jesse. But we did see a few months later in a local newspaper that Jesse had been arrested for possession of meth and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. So the moral of the story is, do not use online dating sites. It may sound good in theory, but at the end of the day, you don't know who's at the other end of the messages. Have you guys ever been out somewhere and you see something that you know that you shouldn't have seen, and to make matters worse, somebody witnessed you seeing it? Somebody who didn't want you to see it. My name is John. I live at home with my 2 dogs and I live a pretty ordinary life. Everything seemed to be going pretty well I had a pretty good job, no girlfriend in the picture, so I could save all the money I make. And I had just purchased the Xbox One X. I was so stoked to play Halo with my friends. The Xbox One X probably wasn't the smartest purchase that I ever made, probably due to the fact that my car was broke down and I could have used that money to fix it. But I honestly didn't think it was that big of a deal because the subway was just a couple blocks away, and I could walk there and practically take the subway all the way to work. Just so you know, the job that I work's an office job, the whole 9 to 5 schedule. But occasionally, when things get backed up and we get really busy, people will have to come in and work overnight from time to time. I really don't mind coming in and working the overnight. I get to put my earbuds on, listen to music. Nobody to deal with. You even get your own key to the office. But best of all, you get double pay, which is something that I'm really needing since I just ended up spending all my money on the Xbox and I really need to get my car fixed. So whenever my boss asked me if I could come in and work the following night, I quickly blurted out that I'd love to. The holidays were coming up anyway, so a lot of people were traveling out of town, and since I was the only one who didn't have a significant other, it just made more sense for me to work because if I wasn't there, I'd be spending my night alone anyways. So the following night rolls around, and it's time for me to get up and head into work. I knew that I had to do this even though I wasn't feeling the best, but I guess that's kind of expected whenever you're used to sleeping at night, and then you gotta end up working at night. I told myself, you can do this, and I made me some coffee very quickly before I left and put it into my thermos. As I stepped outside, I realized it was pouring down rain. Damn, I don't even have a jacket. I figured the rain and the exercise would do me a lot of good, so I hurried up and jogged down to the subway station. I got down there, and I sat on the bench. Cold. Freezing. After about 15 minutes of waiting, that coffee was running through me, and I finally decided I had enough time to run to the bathroom before the train got there. After I finally finished taking a long-needed piss, I washed my hands and proceeded to open up the door to go back out and wait for the train. Upon touching the door, I realized there was something warm and wet on my hands. I looked down into my horror. I had blood on my hands. I abruptly grabbed a paper towel and wiped it off, and I thought something is seriously wrong here. I knew that I hadn't had the blood on my hands before I entered the bathroom, so I started trying to figure out where it came from. I seen that it was on the door handle, but then I started looking down under the stalls to see who was in the stall at the very end because it was closed, but I thought it was empty. And to my horror, I saw a body laying on the floor, bleeding, pale, its lifeless face, eyes open. The horror still froze on that person's face as their last moments had met them. But that wasn't all that I seen. I quickly noticed a pair of black boots standing there in the corner. This murder had just happened, and I had just missed it. I figured my best option was to get out of there as quickly as possible and pretend like I didn't see anything. I know it's a coward's move, but the only thing I was thinking about at the moment was my own survival. I didn't want to end up dead in the subway just because I happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I sprinted out the door, and to my relief, the train was just pulling up. I quickly got on and took a seat. Just as the doors were about to close, a tall, filthy-looking bald guy stepped into the train. I glanced down and seen it was the same pair of black boots that I'd saw previously. I sat there quietly, hoping that he wouldn't recognize me, but he was staring at me. I quickly took my eyes off of him, and I looked out the black windows. The only light that we had to see was the light in the train car. After what seemed like an eternity, we finally reached my stop. Without haste, I exited the train, and to my relief, someone else had exited the train with me, so I wasn't alone. I swiftly walked down the remaining 2 blocks to my workplace, every now and again checking behind me to make sure that I wasn't being followed. It was a relief that I hadn't noticed anybody behind me, and I thought, thank God that that's over with, and that guy's gone and out of my life. After getting to the building where I worked, I took the elevator up to the 7th floor. That place looks eerie at night if you've ever seen it. Cubicles everywhere, offices, and since it was nighttime, there weren't many lights on. They turned the lights off every day after the day shift, besides a few that remained on 24/7 to save electricity since no one was there. I usually would have taken my regular seat, which faces towards the window, but due to the fact that I was creeped out about the events that had unfolded earlier, I took a seat in front of the window, which was facing towards the door, all the way across the room. That way, if anybody was to come in, I would see them and I would have a chance. I was really creeped out and I wasn't wanting to take any chances on anything happening to me, at least without me being able to put up a fight. After about 45 minutes, I heard the ding from the elevator. I waited a few moments and I didn't hear anything. So I pulled out my phone and I texted my boss. I apologized for texting him so late, but I asked him, would anybody else be coming in to work with me tonight? He responded that it was alright, and he said that no one else was supposed to be coming in there, and so I'll have the building to myself. He asked, was everything alright? He's actually one of those bosses that care about their employees, which is a rare thing that you find in today's world. I told him that everything was alright, and I thought that I must just be hearing things. He responded, alright then, well, have a good night at work, and if you need anything, just call or text. I sat there a little bit longer, and after a few moments of silence, I got back to work, and I told myself that I was just hearing things. But about 10 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of doors opening and closing, chairs being thrown across rooms, papers flying. Then the realization set in. This guy must have been following me to work. He's been going floor by floor, door by door, trying to find me. Without hesitation, I turned my monitor off as I heard the footsteps getting closer and closer. I got down as low as possible and slowly crawled my way towards the door. I got under the desk at the first cubicle. Then the waiting game began. I knew that this was going to be my only chance to get out of here. The footsteps grew closer. I could hear the sound of the boots. As they were going right by me, I could hear the guy humming to himself. Then he quietly sang to himself,
I'm going to kill you.
He paused in the doorway. He stopped there for what seemed like 2 or 3 minutes. He said aloud,
Look, this isn't anything personal against you. You just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. But despite that fact, I have a family to feed, and I can't feed them if I'm behind bars rotting in a jail cell. It's just good business. Let's go ahead and make this easier on both of us. And why don't you step out and reveal your location? Also, I know you're on this floor because when I pushed the elevator button, I seen that it came from the 7th floor.
My heart sank as I realized that this guy wasn't going to let me out of here alive. He began to slowly walk into the room. I kept as quiet as I could, hiding under the desk. Sweat began to form on my forehead and palms. I just knew that he was going to look under this desk and find me, and that's where it was all going to end. I thought to myself, what am I going to do? What's going to happen to my dogs? Who's going to feed them when I'm gone? Will anybody even know that I'm missing? Just as I thought that it was all over, he was going to have me. He continued to walk by. He didn't look under that desk. What luck! I seen the opportunity that I had at hand, and I seized it. I popped up from under the desk. I grabbed the computer chair that was sitting there, and I threw it at him as hard as I could. It struck him in the back, and he yelled in pain as he fell over. I bolted for the door and began running out towards the elevator, and I hit the elevator button. I thought to myself, damn, this thing's taking too long. It needs to hurry up. Just as the doors opened, I heard his footsteps coming out the door. That chair had barely slowed him down at all. I knew by now that things were really bad and they were probably going to take a turn for the worst. I sprinted into one of the other offices to take cover. I don't think that I've ever ran so fast in my life. Papers flew off the desk. I could feel the cool air on my sweaty forehead as I ran into that other office. Once again, I took cover under a desk. This time I took cover at one at the back of the room. I pulled up my phone as quietly and quickly as possible, and I texted my boss and told him what was going on. I told him to send the cops, and then I proceeded to call the cops myself, and I very quietly told them that someone was after me, and I told them the address. They tried to get me to stay on the line, but I heard the guy coming, so I hung up quickly and put the phone into my pocket. I could hear the man in the hallway. He was furious.
I was gonna make it easy on you, but you're gonna die a horrible death now. I'm gonna hack you to pieces, one limb at a time.
I could tell he was serious now. I heard the sounds of desks being flipped over in the office just beside mine, chairs flying. He was on a rampage. He was screaming and muttering stuff to himself as he did this. The police station wasn't too far from here, but I realized that they may not have enough time to get here, so I figured I gotta find something to defend myself. I started scrounging around the room, looking at chairs, tables, under desks, looking for anything that I could possibly use to save myself. Self-preservation was the only thing that I was concerned about at that moment. After looking around a moment, I found a stapler. I realized that this stapler may be the only chance that I have of getting out of here alive. Now the stapler that I picked up, it wasn't one of those new lightweight staplers. It was one of those old metal ones. Well, the time has come. The wait is over. He is entering into the room that I'm in, and he's making sure to check every desk. No table, no chair, nothing is left unturned. This is the moment of truth. This is where it all goes down. I was hunched over in a crouching position at the very back of the room behind the cubicle with the stapler in hand. I heard his footsteps slowly get louder, one after the other. Left, right, left, right. My heart was racing. Just as he was right on top of me, I mustered up the courage to do this. I stood up and I threw the stapler at his head as hard as I could. I heard a thud as the stapler struck him in the temple. I heard him collapse onto a cubicle and onto the desk. I ran by as fast as possible. Damn, who is this guy? I thought to myself as I ran out the door. I could hear the rattling of desks and chairs as he got up and sprinted after me. I knew once again that I wasn't going to have time to get onto the elevator. I realized that there are steps that are only to be used during emergencies. I hit the fire escape and I ran down there as fast as possible. I could hear him yelling and jumping down the steps as he chased after me. The sounds were getting closer and closer. By the time I got to the ground floor, he was just a few feet behind me. Jerked the fire escape and door open just as I got to the ground floor. I ran through the lobby. Just as I knew he was about to get me, the police came bursting in with their guns drawn. They honestly didn't know who was who, and they commanded that we both get down. We were both searched and held down and questioned. Hell, to be honest, I didn't even mind being questioned or held down even when I didn't do anything wrong. I was just glad that I was able to escape this situation. After I gave them my statement, they told me that I was also going to have to come down to the police station with them. After hours and hours of questions, it was determined that I was an innocent man. They thought that this man had some sort of ulterior motive to coming after me and trying to kill me, but he explained everything that happened since he was caught, and that I just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I was glad to get out of that situation. That hitman had a body count of over 47 people. Luckily, that's where it's going to end. And if it hadn't been for my quick thinking and the quick reaction of the police, that night, it would have been 48. My name's Brandon. I'm a country boy out here in Idaho. I live in the small town of Salmon, Idaho. This story actually takes place just a couple weeks after I graduated high school. School wasn't really a fun experience for me. I wasn't really into all that learning stuff and pretty much knew that I wanted to raise cattle after I got out. For all my life, everything that I'd done was outdoors. I loved hiking, I loved fishing, I loved riding my dirt bike, and above all, camping was at the top of my list on things to do for fun. Since I was finally done with all of this high school bullshit, I called my friend Bobby, and he called his older brother Frank. I called my buddy Bobby, and in turn he called his brother Frank and told him we were ready to go camping at the Salmon Chalice Forest. This is a long-awaited trip. We had been planning this for years. My friends were much older than me, and they were going to a local community college, but we had all decided that we would wait until I was done and we would all go out there camping together. It's a beautiful place. Out in the middle of nowhere, no cell phone service, nothing. It's just you and nature. Like any place secluded like that, it does have its own set of dangers. For instance, if you were to get hurt out there, you're by yourself. It's going to be a long time until help arrives. And that's even if you can call for help. There are moments where you have signal, but the signal and cell phone reception is shoddy at best, and that's during the best times. 90% of the time, all your phone's going to say is no service. Although we are going to be doing some hiking and fishing, falling while hiking is the least of our concerns. The biggest thing that we know to watch out for is grizzly bears. Just as a precaution, Frank brought a couple of 12-gauge shotguns with him. He sternly said to Bobby and I, We need to have at least one of these shotguns with us at all times. I'm not about to end up like one of these people you see mauled to death by a grizzly bear. That's the worst way you can possibly go out, and I don't think that you want to go out that way. Nobody should ever go out that way. We nodded our head in agreement. We proceeded to set up camp in this field. We painstakingly made sure that all the tents were done correctly. We must have been out there for over an hour getting everything set up when Frank says, "Pack up, put everything back in the F-150, we're moving to a different spot." Me and Bobby protested and said, "We just spent all this time setting everything up. Why are we going to a different spot?" Frank said, "Trust me, this isn't the spot for us. I've been here before. You guys haven't. There are way better spots here than this. And I think that if we're going to do this, we need to do it the right way." Bobby and I sighed as we slowly undid the stakes from our tents and began to pack everything back up. I thought to myself, this is garbage. I was just ready to relax and enjoy myself. After all, I just finished school. I deserve a break. But then I thought, well, relaxation will be here soon. After we get the tent up, everything's going to be good and we can crack open a beer. That gave me a burst of energy, just imagining what fun times that we had ahead of us. Finally, after everything was packed up and we made sure that everything was secured to the truck, we hopped in it and we headed down the road for what seemed like nearly an hour. The road was bumpy and you could tell it was mainly unused. Frank finally stopped the truck and he said, "Right here." We glanced out our window and we seen a creek winding through the mountain, down right beside of us. It was amazing. You couldn't imagine a more beautiful camping spot if you tried to. I was so ready to get this camping trip started, I hurriedly took everything out of the truck and began setting up everything by myself. Unlike the first time we set it up, it must have taken me only 30 minutes to get everything set up. After that was all done, we all searched for a few stones and began to make a fire pit. My stomach started growling and I realized that I was getting quite hungry at this time. I hollered out, "Hey Bobby, Frank, what do we got to eat? Do we got some hamburgers or hot dogs or something?" Frank laughed as he tossed me a fishing rod. He said, "If you're wanting something to eat, then you're going to have to catch it. The only thing that I brought with us here is water. If we're not good enough outdoorsmen to catch our own food, then we don't have no business being out here." Me and Bobby got pumped up as we agreed. We began baiting up our fishing rods of worms that we dug freshly from the dirt. They wriggled back and forth trying to escape, and they eventually submissed as we stuck the hook through their body. While we were fishing, I looked up and I seen an eagle flying overhead, and I thought to myself, wow, it sure is great to be in nature. I wish I could be out here all the time, but unfortunately, that's not how the world works. A couple of hours later, we were sitting there with 6 fish. Frank caught 3, I caught 2, and Bobby caught 1. What made it better, besides us giving him shit about his small fish count, was the fact that he had to give us $5 apiece because we had made a wager before we started fishing. He muttered to himself as he handed the $5 over to us. I was happy and I said, "Thanks for the money. You're welcome for a rematch any time." I exclaimed. "That fish is the best damn fish I had in a long time." You could tell that it was fresh wild fish and that it wasn't none of that shit that was grown in a hatchery. We all sat there and we ate until we couldn't eat anymore. After sitting there a few moments staring at the campfire, we decided that we were going to talk and throw back a couple of cold ones. As we sat there and talked to each other amongst ourselves under the stars with only the dim glow of the campfire, we agreed that this is what life is all about. This is what they mean when they say the finer things in life. We made an oath to each other that no matter what, we were going to be friends, and this is going to be something that has to be done on a regular occurrence. It was nice to be out there with each other and be able to talk without the distraction of cell phones and social media and all that horse shit. I pulled out my cell phone and I looked at the time. It was already about 1:30 a.m. By the looks of it, Frank was already out for the night. For as tough as he acts, he sure is hitting the bed early. Bobby and I took that as our cue to hit the bed as well. We knew that in the morning we were going to have a long hike ahead of us and a long day. Bobby said, "See you in the morning, man," and he went to his tent. I sat there for a few moments, drank a couple more beers, then I decided that I would do the same. I laid there for what could have only been 5 minutes, and I was knocked out cold. I was either tired from doing all the fishing and unpacking, or I drank more than I'd thought. I was awoken later by this annoying ass noise. I was scrounging around my tent trying to figure out what I did with my phone when eventually I found it. It had came out of my pocket as I rolled around in my sleep. I looked at the time and it said 5 a.m. I called out, "Bobby? Frank? Do you guys hear that whooping noise?" I didn't get any response. I'm guessing they were still passed out cold. After I said that, the noise stopped for about 10 minutes. I thought to myself, it's just probably some wild animal. So I laid there and I closed my eyes. And just as I fell asleep, I was awoken by the same noise. This time, I wasn't gonna put up with this shit. I yelled out, "Bobby, Frank, get your asses up." Frank said, "What is it?" in a tired groan. I said, "There's some sort of wild animal out here. Get the 12 gauge and let's take care of business." I fumbled with the zipper for a moment before finally being able to get my tent open. I got out as Frank came out of his tent with the 12 gauge. We looked around, but it was completely silent. We tried to use our phones as a light, but we didn't bring a flashlight with us, so we couldn't really see too far. But apparently, whatever was there was gone now. We talked about it for another 5 minutes, and then we decided to go back to sleep. But if whatever it was to return, we were going to be ready for it. We woke up at about 9:36 a.m. Everything seemed normal. We looked around and we didn't see anything until we looked across the creek and we saw some animal tracks. Bobby, Frank, and I had been out in the woods all of our life. We looked at these tracks and we knew that something was wrong. We didn't know what it was, and we knew all the animals around these parts. So it was kind of strange that we didn't really recognize what it was. The tracks left deep impressions in the soil. The claws were long. After looking for a few moments, we decided it definitely was not a grizzly bear. We were able to rule that out. We all got the remainder of the fish that we had cooked, put some in each of our bags, and got a few bottles of water to take with us for the hike. We had been hiking for what couldn't have been more than an hour, when all of a sudden, we heard that strange noise again. We looked, and about 20 feet off the trail, just in the tall grass, there was this strange-looking animal. Its eyes were big and solid black. It was very tall, had a long neck. It had mangled and scarred flesh all over it, but it didn't have any sort of fur or hair at all. When it seen that we seen it, it let out a loud scream. Frank had the shotgun in his hands, but he panicked as the animal came rushing towards us. Bobby, being a more skilled hunter than Frank, didn't hesitate. He quickly grabbed the shotgun from Frank. He raised up, he aimed, he shot it. The animal froze in place and screamed in pain. It began rushing towards us again. Bobby fired again. And again. And again. The animal slowed down a good bit from the wounds, but it kept coming towards us, with blood gushing out of its bullet holes. After it became apparent that shooting this thing wasn't going to work, I said, "We've got to run, we've got to retreat." We ran all the way down the trail, back to the F-150. Quickly got in without grabbing any of our camping stuff. Frank tried to start the truck, but it wouldn't crank. It finally started as the animal was right up on the truck's rear end. Just as we were speeding off, the animal jumped and grabbed onto the back of the truck. It had amazing strength in which we have never seen before. The truck was slowing down as the animal, or creature, or whatever it was holding onto the back of it. It dug its hind legs deep into the dirt and was attempting to stop us at all costs. Frank floored it. The truck started turning sideways as to how strong the animal's grip was on the back left side. I told Frank we got to do something. He stopped, let off the gas for a minute, and then floored it again. He wasn't able to loosen the animal's grip, but luckily the animal's claws cut right through the side of the truck and went out the back. We were yelling in terror as we looked behind us and this thing was chasing us. We got down the road about 5 miles, and as we watched, it finally stopped and gave up the pursuit. We sighed in relief. as we watched the creature, the animal, whatever it was, walk through the freshly kicking up dust and into the tall grass on the side of the road. Whatever that thing was, we're pretty sure that it's not normal. It's not something that naturally occurs in nature. And until this day, we have never went back. We have never checked on our camping supplies. We just left it all there. Hopefully, this creature goes back to where it came, and nobody has to deal with it. I can't even begin to imagine. I am horrified to even think about what would have happened if we wouldn't have been able to stop that creature. We probably wouldn't have been here to tell this story today. Thank you guys for watching this video. I really appreciate all the support. Be sure to leave a like and comment below. And be sure to hit that bell button so you'll get a notification when I upload my next video.
Until next time.